I'm going to mention a couple of documents that I've created to support this presentation, and both of those documents are available to download from Hothouse. So, and I'll talk about that when we hit that. But if you go into the Hothouse Facebook group and you go into files, I've put them up there this morning. So when we get there, I will tell you. But I'm going to start sharing the presentation. And we're ready to go. So we're talking about luxury sales. So we're talking specifically about the different approach you need to take when you are selling to wealthy clients, because the strategies that work at the lower end of the market are the top end of the market is allergic to, and vice versa. So we really cannot appeal to both ends of the market simultaneously. We need to decide where we're going to pitch, and we need to create our own strategy for our business around that. So the first presentation was about the psychology of selling to high net worth individuals. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about practical sales strategies and actions. Now, I mentioned a moment ago, excuse me, I mentioned that the previous first of these two webinars is on YouTube. So if you missed it, you can find it on my YouTube channel, which is at Julia Begbie, and the psychology of selling to high net worth individuals is there for you to watch. I'm so sorry. The works consulted. So I mentioned previously that I had scanned a couple of books. So The Trusted Advisor, Luxury Selling by Francis Run. I also took out a 30-day membership of the Luxury Academy, which is run by this fantastic gentleman called Dr. Paul Russell. And he trains salespeople who engage specifically with high net worth individuals. And he trains them on how to be and how to successfully engage with your high net worth clients. He is also on YouTube, and he's worth taking a look at. And I have found his materials incredibly helpful. So I recommend you take a look at him. And I've also got quite infatuated with this Japanese concept of omotenashi, which I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about later on in the presentation today. But I found a really good video again on YouTube by Lexus. Oh, sorry, that should be Lexus, Lexus. Belux. So I'm sorry, there's a typo in there. But I found a good video there explaining the concept. And it chimes with me because it aligns with a book that I mentioned last time, which is called Unreasonable Hospitality, which is all about high-end restaurants or high-end hospitality, and just how much you need to extend yourself to serve your clients, and to do that selflessly in order to engage with it at this kind end of the market. So these are the works that have been consulted. So today we're going to run through the introduction, some of which we've already had. I want to talk to you about tiers of practice. So the developmental stages of an interior design business, because as I see it, interior design businesses across their development start at tier 1 and ascend up to tier 4. And I'm going to talk you through those stages, because depending what stage your business is at, and you need to sort of self-certify, you would be taking a slightly different approach in terms of your selling strategy to someone who's at a different stage of development of their business. So we'll talk about that. I want to talk to you about Matthew Williamson, the couture designer, now interior designer, and how he inspired me with his questions for clients. I want to talk to you about client desire. We're going to talk about use of language. I'm going to encourage you to know your client, and we're going to talk about omotenashi again, which is this Japanese art of hospitality, because I do think this is where we need to be in order to engage best with these really stratospheric level clients. So this is the first of the two documents that is available for you to download from the Hothouse group. So if you look under files at the top of the Facebook group, you will find this tiered categorization of interior design practices. I'm so sorry. So I categorize interior design practices as being from tier 1 through to tier 4. Now, there's actually a tier 0. Tier 0 is before you start your business. So tier 0 is when you have the intention of starting a business, but you haven't done anything about it yet. So you go from tier 0 to tier 1. Now, tier 1 is launching, not really knowing who your clients are, not knowing what products they're going to want, just putting yourself out there and getting going. So tier 1 is overwhelming. There's lots of imposter syndrome. You're not entirely sure what you're doing behind the scenes. Things are maybe a bit chaotic. That is tier 1. Tier 2 is when you're a little bit more established. You've got the foothold. Your systems are coming together. You are beginning to get an understanding of who you like working with and the kinds of clients that perhaps you won't say yes to again in the future. You've got a good understanding of those clients and maybe the kind of products that they want. And that is tier 2. Once we move into tier 3, that's when you're really well established. You've got your systems sorted out. You are doing really good business. You know who your clients are. You know what your specialisms are. You know why somebody would come to you and why you would be a better fit for them than your competition. You've really got it all sorted. You're doing very well, and you possibly have other people working with you. So that is tier 3. Then there is a big step up, and the big step up is to stardom. So I call this as being from startup to stardom, tiers 1 through 4. And tier 4 is when you decide that you are going to jettison the safety net. You're going to go hell for leather for these top tier, these top strata clients. You're going to have to become more exclusive because they won't want to deal with you if you're not exclusive. And when you become more exclusive, you start to shed the clients who really have been your bread and butter up until now. So it's a very brave step to take, this step up to being a well-known interior designer. So those are our 4 stages now, 4 tiers. The reason that I have spoken to you about these is because we're going to have different strategies for selling depending where you categorize your business as currently sitting. And what I do is I help interior designers shift up. So that's where I really see my specialism within interior design business coaching. So I help the tier 1s get to tier 2, the tier 2s get to tier 3, and the tier 3s get to tier 4. And we're going to look at that a little bit more. So I wanted to start with taking the brief. So the initial stages of the design process. And at tier 1, we're being quite factual. We're being quite we're not diving very deep necessarily. We're thinking about improving spatial planning. We're thinking about palettes and materials. We're finding out what our client likes. Now, this is phased. So we phase through from tier 1 through to tier 4. But by the time we get to tier 4, you're dealing with clients who've moved past the need, really, to explain their tastes or justify their choices. They need you to interpret their essence. So we're talking about a much more sophisticated level of psychological understanding of your client as you ascend the levels of sophistication of interior design practice. So this is where I wanted to bring in Matthew Williamson, because he wrote a book a few years ago now called Living Bright. And in this book, he shared, so obviously Matthew Williamson fashion designer working at the high end of fashion, obviously working in couture. So, parallel sort of scenario to the kind of bespoke interior design that is practiced at the very high end. We've got some parallels there. So Matthew Williamson is accustomed to working with very high-end clients who are the kind of ultra high net worth people that we might be aspiring to work with. And in his book, Living Bright, he shared a list of the 20 questions that he asks his client at briefing. And I've put this list of 20 questions as a document in the Hothouse group. So you don't need to write these down. They are there in the Hothouse group and you can download these questions. They are from his book, Living Bright. Now, when I first read these questions, I loved them. I really loved them, but I was a bit stuck as to quite how they helped you get to really understanding your client and what your client needed in terms of a dress or in terms of an interior. But now I see that what these questions do is they provoke storytelling. So they encourage your client to reminisce. They encourage your client to reveal themselves as they would wish to be seen. They encourage your client to talk about themselves in the way, in the way they want to live, in the lifestyle that they want to have. And if you can nurture these conversations and draw your client out, you're going to get a much deeper psychological understanding of their motivations than you would do if you were asking them sort of yes/no questions about what they want in terms of interiors. So I think I've realized that these are incredibly sophisticated questions and they work brilliantly at this ultra high net worth level. So, they really help us to get under the skin of our client's desire. So our clients, we spoke about, being recognized, having your identity recognized as part of the emotional journey that these high net worth clients go on with their designers. So they help us to get to the client's identity. Who does the client want to be? Recognition of them. What do I want others to see in me? Their control in terms of how they express themselves within their interiors, and the emotion of the space and how they would like it to make them feel. So luxury clients don't just want a beautiful house. They want to feel powerful or free or youthful. They want to be admired, envied, and understood. And they want to live in a space that reflects who they're becoming and not just who they've been. And I really think these Matthew Williamson questions can help us to prompt that conversation. Now, I wanted to give you an example from a job that I worked on where, and this is under the title of getting, sort of amateur psychoanalysis of your client. So not just taking what the client says at face value, but actually thinking about it at a sort of deeper level. So I had a client who told me and my partner, my business partner, that they were now going to express themselves fully in their home, that they had been very successful, that they did have a large budget, but that the biggest fear they had in engaging with us was that their friends and visitors to their home would think that there was something boastful about the work that was done, they would think that they were being ostentatious, that they wanted to avoid any sense that they were showing off, and they really wanted to go with humility and modesty. So that was the brief. This home must in no way appear to brag about the financial success that they had experienced. So in the first stages of the design process, we presented materials and all of them were rejected. And we really were a bit stumped until we realized that what the client actually wanted was for the home to appear not to be boastful, but to actually betray how phenomenally wealthy they really were. They wanted this home to, for those who were able to pick up on the cues, to be a testament to their extraordinary success. And it needed to look like that, but it needed to look like they weren't showing off. It was very subtle and it was quite sort of sophisticated, and it took us a while to get there, but it was very much a case of trying to figure out how does this client want to be represented in the world? And when we figured that out, we started showing them things, beautiful details, exquisite materials, things that were very exclusive. And all of a sudden, we were on the right track. So, you know, the psychological considerations of these clients is very important. Now, the reason I'm going to come back to this in a little bit more detail in a minute, but we've got our tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4. And in terms of public facing materials, in terms of your, how you sell your services to the world, what you say at tier 1 and what you say at tier 4 is completely different. So a client who, and I'm assuming at tier 1 that you're operating more in the mid-market, that you haven't yet, unless you have a network of existing high net worth contacts, you're having to build up your reputation with slightly less luxurious jobs in the first instance. And if you look too expensive at this point, if the business looks exclusive or expensive, the client is put off from approaching. So at tier 1, you do have to be, you have to express the kind of investment that the client is likely to be getting into and the kind of services that you offer in order for people to feel like they can approach you, that they're not put off because there aren't any prices and they're feeling that you look too expensive. So that's tier 1. At the other end, and tier 4, you have clients who are accustomed to entering exclusive spaces. They have no fear of walking into expensive, exclusive places because they're not worried about the financial fallout. They don't need reassurances about the cost. On the contrary, what they want to feel is that the service that they're going to get is going to be customized. It's going to be tailored specifically to them. They want to be seduced by personalization and the scale of the transformation. So if at tier 1, you put out a sales strategy for tier 4, you'll scare people off. If at tier 4, you're still saying the same things about your services that you were at the earlier stages of your business, you probably won't get approached by these higher net worth clients. So we need to transition as we move through the tiers of our design business. We need to be tweaking this message in terms of our marketing and our sales strategy as we go. Now, something else I think you really need to do is you need to know your client. Occasionally I will get respond to a cold call or whatever, and I'll speak to someone who wants to sell me some digital services or something. And if they don't know what I do, if they don't understand what I do, if they haven't looked, it turns me off immediately. Now, when we're talking about high net worth clients, their career is their identity. And by understanding what it is that you do, you demonstrate your discretion, you demonstrate your intelligence, and you demonstrate your cultural literacy. They expect you, if you're operating at the top level, they expect you to be sophisticated. They expect you to know the difference between a hedge fund manager, a venture capitalist, and a corporate banker, because those are the circles that we all move in. So you need to put yourself onto a crash course on the background of your client, what they do for a living, who their competition is, what level they're at within their business. You really need to understand that so that you look like the correct sort of caliber of person, the correct level of sophistication that they want to be to work with. And their work, of course, is going to inform how they work with you, because maybe they even work on a similar basis to you. So they might have a good understanding of how you manage your business. So again, this designer's cheat sheet, which has just very broad brushstroke descriptions of the different kinds of industries or sectors that your clients might come from, this too is attached in the Hothouse group. But I would strongly suggest to you that when you're approached by a prospective new client, you Google them, you look up their company name, you look up any interviews they might have given, you look at business press releases, you look them up on LinkedIn, you look for their past roles, the industries they work in, the seniority of their role, and you also look for clues that might be there about their lifestyle choices. So, do they own a racehorse? Do they sit on a museum board? Is there a family office that looks after the interests of that particular sort of close-knit group of people? So, knowing your client at this level is another part of your sales strategy. You can't go in there ignorant of what it is they do and what that means in the world. So then we have language and how we use language, because again, it's going to shift. It's going to be a bit different at this top end from the kind of language that we might be using at the bottom end. Although actually, I think this is a shift that everybody could make. This probably works for all of us. So we want language that builds trust, that demonstrates our expertise, that offers tailored solutions, and that is discreet. Whereas we're moving away from emphasizing cost because we're focused instead on the transformation that we're going to bring. We are not overly promotional. We're very tasteful in that respect. And we don't assume familiarity with these people because, we're being invited into a rarefied environment. It's a privilege to be invited into this area. We're going to engage with these people at an intimate level, and we don't want to overstep because, they're sharing a lot with us and we slightly need to know our place within this environment. So we don't assume familiarity. So our language is going to focus on the transformation that we can make happen, our expertise. We're going to use refined language. So allow me to suggest to you, we're going to speak in the sort of language that comes from the highest levels of service. We're going to emphasize the exclusivity of the services that we offer, the rarity of those services. We're going to focus on bespoke solutions. We are going to be discreet and trustworthy, which obviously means we don't talk about our other clients, and we give our clients every expectation that we are going to be discreet about them. We show genuine interest in them. Now, this is part of the Omotenashi way of behaving, that this is all sincere. This is not a performance. We are sincerely interested in them. And we are also going to try and build a personal brand. And I've spoken about that quite a lot elsewhere. I think it's something I'll come back to again in the future. But having a personal brand around us, as well as having our business brand, the two of which are closely aligned, but in our personal brand, we might be able to say slightly different things about our business. We are going to avoid direct money talk. Money is just information. It's just part of, it is the cost of the services that you offer. We're going to steer clear of superlatives. We're not going to sound excessive or exaggerating in the way that we speak. We aren't going to be needy or pushy. We're going to respect the client's boundaries. We won't assume familiarity. We won't use jargon or slang, and we're going to avoid generic language. So the kind of language, nice, comfortable, luxurious, all these terms that are so overused generally within the body of interior design practice. So instead of selling to the client or the client buying, we can assist the client with the acquisition of the products that they need. We can guide them because previously in the last presentation, I spoke about singles tennis when you're sort of in an adversarial position with your client, to now we're playing doubles tennis. We're on the same side of the net. The project is our enemy, our joint enemy. We are on the same side. So we are assisting and we're all working towards the same end. The contract with the client is the paperwork. It's the paperwork, or it's the agreement that we're going to have. We're taking the emotion, as much as we're creating an emotional connection with our client, but as far as we can, we're taking the emotion out of the business side of things. So our relationship is emotional, but the actual business side of things is not emotional. It's just business. The budget, the client's budget, in fact, is the amount of money that the client would like to invest as part of this project. So the budget is the client's investment. And a deposit would be the initial investment that the client needs to make in order to get things started. Within sales, we would want to pull out from the client any objections that they have to the thing that we're trying to sell to them. So normally we would want to, draw out the objections and knock them down. Tell the client why, in this case, the objections that they have to making the purchase are not issues of concern. When we're using the language that we want to use with high net worth individuals, then those objections might become concerns that they have or questions that they might have. And our customer obviously is our client or the family of the client, and we're talking about a much more sort of exclusive relationship. And we're talking about this refined language. So we don't use sort of brutal, it's too strong, but we don't use sort of hard terminology like obviously this, but we talk about naturally or of course, or as you know. Everything has got the emotional sting is sort of pulled out of all of this so that we can keep everything as neutral as we can while we build this emotional relationship with our client. So last time I spoke to you about the 7 stages of the emotional journey that we take to luxury loyalty, with your client's loyalty to your business as the ultimate goal that we have in terms of the working relationship. And I've mentioned now a couple of times this concept, which is quite new to me, but I think is really appropriate here, which is this Japanese concept of service and hospitality, which is called omotenashi. And omotenashi, if we look at it in terms of the client experience as they move through your business, so the different stages of your business, let's have a look at how omotenashi might suggest to us how we would behave at the different stages of the client's journey through your business. So first stage is awareness. When the client becomes aware of your practice through your brand, website, social media, or so on. The omotenashi lens for this is, even before we've met, I want you to feel welcome here. So that might come through in our tone of voice, quietly confident. It might come through in the care that we take in terms of the visual representation of our business that demonstrates that our care, our calm approach, and our attention to detail. It's the avoidance of jargon or having anything jarring or intimidating. We're presenting our business as a sanctuary and not as a showroom. It's not somewhere you're going to come to be sold to. It's a safe space. And last time we talked about emotional safety for the client, existing in a place with us where they aren't going to be exposed to sort of hard selling tactics and techniques. And we are going to include helpful and generous content showing that we already care about our clients even before they've first made contact with us. Second stage, inquiry. The client reaches out to express interest. The omotenashi lens is, You've taken a step toward me. Let me meet you with grace, calm, and clarity. So this is about how you respond to the client. You respond promptly, warmly. You're never rushed or transactional. You have refined templates ready to engage with a client that feel personal and not formulaic. You make it ever so easy for them to understand the next steps of the journey. And this reduces their cognitive friction and makes the clients feel held. You show curiosity about the client as well as about their property. So this is at the point of inquiry. Then once we engage, we have our first meeting with the client. The Omotenashi lens is that we will listen closely so that the client feels completely heard. So we will ask those thoughtful, open-ended questions that uncover deep emotional drivers. And this is where this conversational gambit, the Matthew Williamson approach, I think could be incredibly helpful. Although obviously we do need to understand the practical needs and the aesthetic desires of the client with regard to their home as well. We also listen between the lines to what is not being said, and we make sure that we reflect back to our client with care. We offer small, unexpected gestures of consideration. So we have tailored welcome materials for them. We have refreshments. We send them a follow-up note. We're sort of constantly thinking about things as they're experienced from the customer's side, from the client's side. And we signal that this is a calm, composed, or we have a calm, composed emotional presence, and that we are a safe harbor for them to be engaging with as part of this project. When we talk about the paperwork, when you are presenting your fee, and as we've discussed previously in fee proposal webinars, we actually present our fee proposal. We don't click send and send it off unaccompanied. So when we are presenting our fees, our terms, and our vision, the Omotenashi lens is offering clarity and respect so that you feel safe and confident in your decision. Now, I've said several times that money is information at this level. Obviously, we're respectful. We're respectful of our client. We're not, playing fast and loose with their wealth. But it's just information. So we explain it in an unflustered, precise, and respectful language. We position our service as an investment in their life. It's not a transaction. We are in the business of creating transformation. We use design presentation as an art form, demonstrating care in the way that we present the proposal itself. And we reassure through our clarity. So this is all about our processes and our systems. It's all about, actually somewhere I have got a document, I think I've put it up in Hothouse, which is something like the 14 or 15 different documents that you're going to engage with the client with to help them understand the process through your systems. So we're making sure that our business systems are all incredibly smooth and are all absolutely clear for the client so that they get a great understanding of what they're in line for. So dignity and emotional composure matter throughout this entire process. Design and development, the creation of the design concept and the detailed plans are Omotenashi lenses. You are being thought of even when you are not here. So we communicate proactively and elegantly. We never have the client have to chase us for updates. We have systems and ways of operating that mean that we give our clients regular updates that they learn to expect. And in that way, we can train them into not having to engage with us in the meantime because they know that they are going to be kept up to date. We offer thoughtful touches like material samples or the quality of our design boards. We maintain emotional consistency, so we are always the same. And we anticipate their pain points. For example, the lead times or decision fatigue that they might experience, we can tell them, that in 2 months' time will be 1 month off the end of the project. Let me explain to you how you're going to feel at this stage, because you'll probably be tired. Nothing's going to look quite perfect yet. Let me just take your hand and explain to you exactly how this project is going to feel from your side. Now, I know I talk a lot about using AI, but using systems like ChatGPT or GPT-4 is absolutely brilliant for researching things like the pain points of ultra high net worth clients and thinking about how we are going to engage with those clients and the kinds of things we want to say to encourage them and make them feel secure. You can use AI to research and evolve all of the materials that we're talking about here today. So I'm going to encourage you to do that. Finally, not finally, we've got 2 stages left: implementation and delivery. The Omotenashi lenses, every detail has been considered because you deserve nothing less. Ensuring that handover is orchestrated and not rushed. It's like an opening night at the theatre. Including hidden delights, things that the client isn't expecting, so fragrance, music, personal touches that surprise and comfort. Creating a sense of arrival and completeness, the emotional punctuation mark of the journey, and offering help quietly before it's needed. So troubleshooting things. So for example, we noticed that daylight was bleeding out from behind this blackout, and so here's what we've done to resolve that for you, so that the whole thing feels just beautifully cared for. And then we have aftercare and legacy. So even after the performance ends, your experience, client, really matters to me. So we follow up at elegant intervals with a handwritten card at the 1-year anniversary or a seasonal design note. We offer useful check-ins. For example, how is the lighting working in the study now that it's winter? We introduce new services with discretion and relevance. We don't ever pressurize our clients. And we treat them as a valued, ongoing guest and not as a completed transaction. So that is my interpretation of the Japanese approach in terms of interior design practice. So when we're thinking about transitioning our business up this developmental phasing of interior design practice, as we transition from tier 1 to tier 2, we're beginning to get an understanding of our ideal client. We know the services that will appeal to that client. We're starting to understand where we can find that client, and we've got a better understanding of how to market to that client. So that's the transition from tier 1 to tier 2. As we transition from tier 2 up to tier 3, we're thinking about how you differ, what you have that makes you more interesting than or better than the competition for your particular type of client. You're thinking about having specialisms. So maybe you're really turned on by lighting or by sustainability, or kitchens, or there's some aspects of design practice that you really want to focus in on and become known as an expert in. This is as we're transitioning from tier 1 to tier 3. We're using elevated language. So we're no longer talking about creating comfortable interiors or luxurious interiors, but we actually have something very specific to say that is intoxicating about the difference our involvement is going to make in somebody's home, that is going to be, really unique to our business, and not just what everybody else is saying about their business. You're beginning to have a personal brand. So you are beginning to stand out against the backdrop of your business as someone who it's aspirational to work with, and you have your expertise, the area in which you are choosing to make your specialism. Finally, this transition from tier 3 to tier 4, we are starting now to almost shut down. We're starting to put walls around our business, and only a certain caliber of client can actually enter. So our clients might be aware that there's no, that we don't really deal with projects under a certain size. So we're pre-qualifying our clients. And our role is now that of rainmaker. So it's not so much that we are an interior designer, we are actually an aspirational figurehead who is responsible for attracting business into our business. And there might be then other people in the business who are going to do the lion's share of the work of getting those design projects completed. So we are out there generating the business as a figurehead. We have bespoke services. We have gatekeepers. So there are people who are, you know, dealing with those clients on the way in to make sure that they are indeed the sort of pre-qualified clients that we want to work with. We are stepping forward. We are creating a very high profile for ourselves as a star designer. And as a result, the amount of information that might be available about our services and the cost of those services is actually less, because we deal with clients individually. We create a bespoke package for each new client. We can't say we do this and it costs that, because it depends. Because we are now couture. We're not ready to wear. We are actually, up at those higher echelons. So that's how our different tiers of design practice progression would manifest in terms of what we say about our business. And you can't really jump from tier 1 to tier 4. You are necessarily going to have to go through these various stages. So when we're thinking about this, here are the things that we need to understand. We need to understand, in order to come up with a great sales strategy for ultra high net worth clients, we need to understand the developmental stage of our business, because we're not going to go from tier 1 to ultra high net worth in a single bound unless we're already plugged into that network. There's going to be a progression. We need to understand the psychology of the ultra high net worth client. And I spoke about that at great length in the previous presentation, so we covered off all of that. You need to understand everything about your client. So, in terms of what they do for a living, their place in society, their culture, they are all important, and we can't treat them as being cookie cutter. We really need to get to grips with them. And we need to understand about the emotional journey to luxury loyalty, which again, we spoke about in the previous presentation. You need to think about the client user experience through all of those touch points of your business. How are you coming across? In what respects is your business appealing to these wealthier clients, making them feel like they are in the right place with the right designer? You are a trusted advisor in a partnership. This is a marriage. It's not dating. We need to roll with the punches a bit. We need to consider that we're in this for the long term, and therefore our attitude is going to be more consistent. And we are investing in this relationship because we want it to succeed. So we might be putting a little bit more in up front in terms of getting to know this client in the first place, by which I mean like the lead times into these projects might be quite extended. There might be quite a courtship that goes on before the project actually comes into fruition. And you have to be able to express in a compelling way the nature of the transformation that you create. What is it about working with you that is going to completely transform their lived experience? How do you express that? So this is all part of how we need to be in order to hope to have the greatest success with these high net worth clients. So in webinar 1, we said we needed a mindset shift. Our ego needs to be healthy enough to take a back seat because the client is paramount. Overstepping, we never lose sight of the privilege of our position of being in the same room, hoping to work with these clients. And we build our relationship by subtle micro movements, just gently sort of testing and improving the emotional connection with our clients and constantly reading the room. So we become very sensitive to tiny, tiny little reactions from our clients as we're building our relationship. So I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to move on to see if anybody would like to discuss any of that. Does it ring true? Does it sound, do you recognize it? Does it sound relevant?
Well, I have to say, Julia, this is amazing, fantastic. And after our first webinar, I actually applied some of your knowledge. I have a couple of questions. So, number one, it's talking about on the slide about, just bear with me 1 second. Omotenashi, number 4, proposal and agreement. The question regards a possible example around how to position your services as an investment in their life, not a transaction.
Um,
Having said that, a little bit of context here. A client who is a trader, and what you said earlier in terms of knowing what kind of business they're in. It's a little bit, I do my research, we do our research very well. Sometimes it's not easy to get to pinpoint all the aspects of it. And what I found is that this type of client is always transactional. So there's a sort of dichotomy between how we need to be, that we can't be transactional, but
yeah,
they are transactional.
yeah.
So the whole communication and narrative is not around well, I turn it around. It's around the added value and that we provide, and how it's essential to work with, for example, my studio or any other studio, and the benefits they basically get out of that. So we don't talk about budget, we talk about investment. And yes, the first, part of investment, it's but sometimes I find it a little bit difficult in uh, challenging, let's say challenges and opportunities we talk about, not problems, uh, but how to basically break through that, especially at the beginning of a relationship. Maybe it's more than one question, but
Yeah.
sorry about
No, no,
that.
no. I would say yes, some certain types of people whose whole life is about making deals.
Yeah.
That is what they do for a living. They make deals, and they are going to try to drive everything into the transactional. However, that same person, let's assume it's a man, has custom-made suits. And when he goes to Savile Row to his tailor to have his suit made, his tailor sells him on the exceptional quality of the fabric, the craftsmanship, and so on. And that tailor doesn't allow themselves to be pushed into becoming transactional. That tailor still expresses the value, not in terms of money, but the quality, the service, and so on. And it just is an exceptional service, and you provide an exceptional service. So if your client is trying to force you into the transactional, of course you have to meet them in terms of telling them how much things are going to cost and so on. But you don't need to be bullied into becoming just a transactional person yourself. You adhere to the quality of your services. You might need to be able to express it more succinctly. They might not have time but actually, even it's amazing how people who are so busy actually have the time to make phone calls about this kind of thing. You know, this really matters. This is really important to them. And you would get to the bottom of understanding their motivations through the kinds of conversation that I was talking about, the Matthew Williamson type of drawing them out type of storytelling conversation. So does that touch on any of your sort of questions within that sort of bundle?
Yeah, but it's absolutely relevant. Actually, I used during the presentation when he was wanted to get a fixed figure, which is not possible at the beginning of the project because we don't even know the scope of work that they want to define. I use the word cookie cutter. I said we're not that. But in terms of what you said in reference to the list of Matthew Williamson, I also have a question about that. Because we've created throughout the years and finalized and refined what we call a lifestyle questionnaire, which we send out once a project is signed, is the first, if you want, the first point of that represents the beginning of the journey together, as I describe it to them. And there are, very personal questions. But I wonder if this list, which I found very interesting because we work a lot around storytelling and narrative of design, I wonder if this list refers more to, if you want, the first set of questions that you would ask them. Because then when you have to go into actually defining the spaces
Yes.
and knowing their preferences, you need to be much more specific than this.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Yes,
this
I
is
think so.
sort of aspirational, is
Yeah.
basically building a sort of a setting of the movie that you're
Yeah.
going to make,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I think if you think of yourself as a sculptor with a block of marble,
Right.
you can use those Matthew Williamson questions to start carving out the general shape, and then you can dig in with more sort of specific questions to get down into the intricate detail of the thing that you're creating. But I do think, there for those of us who are in the early stages of building a design practice, whose questionnaires might be more sort of specific and factual, it's quite interesting to think more about the psychological and how you can get the client to talk about themselves. And I think that's a really good list of questions.
Thank
Any
you.
other any other questions? Anybody else? Sonia?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. Honestly, again, absolutely blown away by the high level of quality and content. You're just so wonderful, Julia. You
Thank
really
you,
are.
Sonia.
Yeah, also just a couple of questions about the questionnaire. Obviously, I'm looking to do more commercial work, but it was making me think about how I'm going to relate to these clients as well. So I wouldn't necessarily have a lifestyle questionnaire, but a diversification questionnaire. I think I'm going to have to ask them different questions in terms of, who are the clients that you're looking to attract? And, how do you see this rolling out and sort of like, what's your 5-10 year plan with this project in terms of, you know, do you want to expand your business beyond the initial diversification offering that you're setting up? And yeah, it's just making me think about all sorts of different questions that I'm going to have to ask them. And then you mentioned something about consistency in terms of, yeah, emotional consistency, and that is so important. And we've had an example of that recently. I wasn't actually on site, but I've heard from a project that we're working on at the moment that a joiner has basically just been having big meltdowns on site in front of the client, and it's really upset the client, and therefore it's then left a bad taste in the mouth of everybody else working, the builder, the QS, and how upsetting that is for the client. They spent an enormous sum of money with them, and then to have someone freaking out like that and storming off site, and it's so disrespectful but so unnerving for them as well. But anyway, thank you, just
No,
amazing,
yeah.
thank
I
you.
mean, I don't like to mention specific people. I regularly talk about Karen Howes of Taylor Howes. who was someone who I observed quite at close quarters when she used to help out a lot when we were teaching at KLC. And I mean, she is just the same every time you see her. You just cannot imagine her ever getting ruffled about, she is just like, she's delightful, she's full of energy, she's always positive, but she is just utterly consistent. And I think that is the level of professionalism, so the emotion is in the relationship with the client. It's a much more emotional relationship, but the emotion is not in the roller coaster of the ups and downs of the project. That is a flat line.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of levels of professionalism that we need to get to have a hope of engaging with these people that are up there at the top of the stratosphere.
Yes, particularly at the stage that, well, you did a post about it recently, and I said I talk about my clients, project slump, because that will come, and they will have totally exhausted, with decision fatigue. They're handing out money left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
They're surrounded by mess and chaos and too many people, and that's particularly the point where we have to remain as a flat line and just be calm and consistent with them.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really important.
having warned them that it's going to happen.
Yes, and
Yeah.
then prove that we're the sort of like the calm amid the storm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you so much.
Cool. Any other questions?
Can I just say something about just on the back of that, actually? I think one thing about commercial is schedule of works. There's usually a project manager, there's usually a schedule of works, and if there isn't, that's when you massive alarm bells. A lot of the commercial work is either driven by the architect or their own department. Obviously, if it's massive, they've got their own sort of thingy. And that's where I found with residential, because you say schedule of work to someone, they literally look at you a blank face going, what the hell are you talking about? I have found where I've tried to implement it, because obviously I'm thinking, again, talking about managing the client. So you're talking about, as you said earlier, about there's going to be periods where there's a bit of quiet because either furniture is literally being made and on its way, or there's a period where fitted furniture is being made in the workshop. Nothing's happening on site. Who takes responsibility of that? Because I'm finding issues when I do residential work because of that big question mark of schedule of works.
I think that's probably a question for a different webinar, Rachel, because that's more to do with how you manage a design project. Whereas what we're talking about today.
Is it what I'm saying is, though, obviously when there is a schedule of works, and I've put it in place because basically there is none.
Yeah.
You can evade, or you can counteract those arguments where the client, or those feelings, I should say emotionally, where the client is feeling like wobbly and like, well, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? Because you're in sort of, say, in control, because you can see those periods. When you're stepping in and you're not the main driver, it's very difficult. Again, you're absolutely right. Keep a calm, collective emotion yourself, but you do get swapped up with other trades not performing.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you get that path? How do you make sure that you're still you're seen to be the calming waters?
I think if you've had those experiences, you have a good idea of the potential pitfalls of a project as you approach it. And part of your briefing of the client is to clearly explain to the client the things that are likely to happen that could be challenging through the project.
Yeah,
So, in my experience, I'm coming in late, and somebody else is, we've obviously got this project manager.
Yeah.
In my experience, these are the points in the project where things might get challenging.
Right.
So you use your experience to pre-brief the client. But when we're thinking about, I any project that has construction going on, even if it's really just decorating, I would imagine you would have a schedule of works, you know, for residential projects or commercial projects alike. But maybe we're even looking at the language around that, because, you know, schedule of works, if you say it to a client, it's like, well,
Well, exactly. It's such a
so
commercial terminology.
yeah, so what we're talking
Yeah.
about today is making sure that the client understands everything that is about to happen. They understand exactly how it's going to work, or you're taking all of that away from them so they don't need to worry about it.
Yeah.
But
I find that, again, it'll be interesting for other people whether they use a different terminology.
yes.
Does anyone use a different terminology when you're talking about planning a project? Just because
I
I
would,
feel that is quite a commercial word.
yeah, maybe call it scope of works, but
Right.
I mean, maybe I'm literally sitting here thinking, perhaps as part of the company documents that we send out, once a project is given the go ahead, as well as a questionnaire, we send out a glossary of terms so
Yeah.
clients can understand what they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
like FF&E.
Yeah.
Caroline.
Just to say, I think from my perspective, it's almost trying to just alleviate the worry for the client of having to deal with the builder and any problems. And actually, I've seen my role as just taking that on, so that they're just not having to worry about it. Almost doesn't matter what you call it, because they're not trying not to let them worry about that side of it. And
Yes.
and you know, the point about giving them regular updates, so they know that if there is a problem, you're going to speak to them about it when you need to, and sort of when you need them.
Yeah. I think the kind of projects that we're talking about, you know, at very high level, that would be our role. Our role would be to insulate the client from the worst of the ups and downs of the project.
I
You know,
think, Julia, the other point I wondered, I found I think the steps is really interesting in terms of being able to sort of think, where am I now and where do I want to be? My only observation with clients I've worked with, and are they high net worth? I mean, certainly they have had significant disposable income and haven't been earning the income, if that makes sense. Whether it's their tier 4 clients, I don't know. But I do think every client's really individual. So I think the Matthew Williamson, if I asked some clients that, it would really turn them off. And I used to work in a global law firm, so I worked with a lot of equity partners, and they were all so different. Some people actually just wanted to be treated quite normally.
yes.
And they didn't want the airs and graces. And other people, you had to behave quite differently, but all of them, you had to respect their time. That was a non-negotiable for all of them, because it was so valuable to them. So I think there are some things probably that are common, but I don't know whether that's because perhaps I'm not at that level.
Well, no, on the contrary, Caroline, I'd say that's the kind of intuition that you need to have to be successful at the top level, to understand that it's not one size fits all, you know, that you are going to have to be sensitive to the vibe that you're getting from the client, and adjust the way that you work with them in order to make it as comfortable an experience for each one of them as it can possibly be. And you're quite right. You know, there are some clients, it's like concept boards, you know, concepts. Sometimes you share it with a client, sometimes it's just there for you as a sort of little private bit of inspiration. And the choice to share or not would depend on whether you think the client would value that or whether it might concern them, or, you know. So I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
But really helpful. Thank you.
Good, excellent. Any other questions? I think we're well over the hour now, so nothing more. Okay. Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for coming along, and I'm going to stop recording.